What's up, everybody? Welcome back to my channel. We're dealing a true crime and mystery. If you're new here, I'm Morgan, and today I want to talk about Gypsy Rose Blanchard on a podcast with Kail Lowry. I believe it's Barely Famous. I wasn't actually going to watch this until I saw a clip on TikTok. I had to go back and watch this and comment on this. Typically, I don't really keep up with every single thing that she does, just because there's a lot of stuff and I don't really care about half of the things that she actually does. Irrelevant things like what she's wearing, what she's doing, I don't care. But if it relates back to the case in some way, it piques my interest. So I really want to get into this because she's going over some things that I really want to point out. But before we do that, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button so you can keep up with any new videos that come out on my channel. So let's get into this. I'm going to play a few, it's not really clips because I didn't go and find the actual video. I just went to the actual podcast. We'll just go through it that way.
I was really impressed with how thorough it was. There were a couple things, and we'll get to it later on, about, about Nick and some of the things that I didn't really know. I don't know if I just didn't follow his story as much, but in the book, you said that you were in a silent standoff, right? So your mom was desperate to sort of keep control over you. Looking back, do you still feel the same way?
I do.
Yeah.
I just feel a little bit more humanity towards her now. Mm-hmm. Because after going through all the research with family members, I started to learn that she seemed very self-isolated. She was just not someone that had a social life herself. It was very much keep us in a tiny bubble.
Do you think that that was intentional and she was aware of it? Or do you think it was more like she didn't really know that she was doing these things?
I think maybe both.
Okay.
I have feelings about both. So, I think that it was intentional to not correspond with our family, not correspond with my father. And so I think that part was intentional, but I don't think that maybe she was aware how that affected me in a negative way.
Okay. So maybe some of the other things that were happening were in relation to, self-isolating, but she wasn't really aware of what she was, how deep this was going.
How much it hurts.
Okay. That's interest to it for sure. If you had to guess, how many times do you think that you've been under anesthesia?
Probably over 100, probably.
And do you know what the side effects of that are? Do you have, I think I've read something about short-term memory or long-term memory. Do you feel like you feel any side effects, long-term effects from it?
I haven't noticed any so far, which I feel like I'm blessed for that.
Yeah, for sure.
Going under anesthesia, when I was a kid, I didn't ask questions.
Right.
So it's all the side effects and everything, all the dangers, was told to my mom, not to me.
Right. Right, because you were a minor.
Right.
Okay, so I'm going to pause right here for a second and then go over what was just said. Obviously, in the beginning, Gypsy, this is obviously a promotion for her book, right? Wanting people to read it and wanting people to be intrigued by this book and get some other information about her story that she hasn't, put out in her other 480-something documentaries that she's already been in, whatever. So she begins to talk about how she was beginning to see her mom with a little bit more humanity, I guess. It all sounded very phony, but extremely crazy to me that she wants to pretend that she was under anesthesia for over, or at least 100 times she guessed. This is the issue that I feel that needs to be really amplified, is this girl is lying so much for no reason. This is the problem. Seriously, this is an issue. Her and her attorneys and her family, her close family, they have lied. This is a lie. I think some of her family has obviously been manipulated, clearly, but I think that, God, I wish that they were willing enough to go and actually look through the records that they have, especially her close family, and see that this is not okay. And if she's gonna lie to their face, That's insane, unless they actively know and are just going along with the lie. I just don't see that. I think they truly believe her. I think they might have some doubts about what she says, but overall I think they believe her, and I think it's an issue and they really should be aware. But I feel like people prefer to just believe a pleasant lie over a hard truth most of the time in situations like this. But let's go through some of her medical records while we're talking about it. I have it on a digital file, and I can type in the word anesthesia in over 200 documents, so 200 pages, which is really not a lot when you think about it for all the doctor visits that she says she's had. That's really not a lot. I'm pretty sure I probably have more as a kid, like just being goofy and getting hurt and various illnesses that I had as a kid. That's really not a lot of documents. For somebody that was medically abused, typically there's like thousands and thousands and thousands of pages. This is like nothing for a 20-year-old woman. I mean, really, that's 220 something pages total? Wild. But so I typed in the word anesthesia just to see how many times it popped up, and it was not even 100 times in the 200 pages. It popped up like 50 times. And before that goes anywhere, I want to say, obviously everybody knows that whenever you go to the hospital or you go to the doctor, you get in your records, it's like a little patient guideline. You get sent home with basically take-home instructions on what to do if you feel this way, or if something happens with a medication, or if you've had a procedure. Even if it's not like a huge surgery, they'll just give you a bunch of packets just to pretty much cover their own bases. I guess defend themselves if something happens. They can't have people coming back and saying they didn't know because it's there in the packet. So if the word anesthesia only comes up around 50 times in the 200 pages, and some pages contain the word itself like 4 or 5 times just in instructions only, do the math. It doesn't add up. Pretending that she's having over 100 surgeries, that's just insane to me. Even on Gypsy Rose Blanchards' own diagram that she drew herself for Ryan Anderson while she was in prison, I guess as a way to be vulnerable with him and show that she's covered in scars from all these surgeries and all her trauma. Let's look at this diagram up close. I think this is just the most hilarious thing when I look at it every time, for this girl to say that she's had over 100 surgeries, and this is what she's got. Mole. 2 moles. A muscle biopsy scar. That's a biopsy. A biopsy is like they just quite literally go and cut. Mole. Oh, okay, there they are. So one set of scars where she had the salivary glands removed for hypersalivation, which she apparently thinks society is just full of idiots, thinking that you can just slather Orajel on your mouth and be able to fool a doctor that way. You can't do that. First of all, Orajel has a distinct smell to it, and it just doesn't work that way. They did swallow studies on her. They did she's had so many tests done, not procedures. She's had various tests rule out various concerns that Dee Dee had about things based on Gypsy's own words. This wasn't always Dee Dee going into the hospital and saying, oh, I think she has this, and this, and you better believe me because I know, because I was a medical assistant that work at a hospital. I don't think people understand that just because you work at a medical facility, you don't have the knowledge and the information to be able to know the intricate details of these diseases. I honest to God think that when Dee Dee was saying that Gypsy had muscular dystrophy, she was probably saying muscle atrophy, because Gypsy did have that. That's a fact. Every time that Gypsy says that she had this muscle biopsy done and that it came back completely normal is a lie. It irritates me because she would say that her mom was able to charm the doctors and to get them to believe things, but whenever you get tests done, it's not the doctor that's actually performing these types of tests, right? So when you get your blood drawn, when you get a biopsy, they send it off to a lab, and the lab techs are the ones that will read it. Or if you're getting an x-ray, The radiologist is going to read it. They're not going to be meeting with the mother or the patient. So there's no way that any of that could have any influence on these results. They're not going to just put that something was abnormal whenever it came back normal. They're just not going to do that. The results were abnormal because there was something going on. Period. Everything that Gypsy had done, and I feel like people don't get it. She didn't need all these surgeries. She didn't have that many surgeries. She really did not have that many surgeries comparatively to what she says. So if you're counting ear tubes that 80% of kids get when they're little, kids get ear infections. Kids get sick all the time. It's just unavoidable. Every parent knows that. You can't prevent it. Allergy season, as school comes along, everybody's passing everything around. I was prone to ear infections as well, but my dad told them not to give me tubes because he was just weird about things like that. But my eardrum busted. Like, I had a horrible time with ear infections as a kid. So she's counting those as operations, which a good majority of those, it's not anything. You can see right here, this is Gypsy's medical records from Tulane University. Chronic otitis media with effusion, that is an ear infection, hypersalivation. Post-operative diagnosis, so this was after she had the tubes placed. Yes, it counts as a surgery. Is it like a detrimental to your health, removing your liver type of thing where you could risk your life? Not really. She got Botox into her salivary glands. I've never seen where her salivary glands have actually been removed. I think that shows the procedure being done. All I've ever seen is this right here where it says that she got Botox. Later on, it says that they were removed. I don't know. So I'm going to be clear on that. I've never personally seen the operation report for that, but I have seen the ones for the Botox. And since I'm not going to be playing the entire podcast, obviously if you wanted to go listen to it yourself, you could. But in there, Gypsy did say, when I was younger, I had reflux. She had GERD. She had acid reflux. It says it right there. So the number of things that Gypsy's mom actually didn't lie about and that Gypsy actually had continues to build up. That the number gets higher and higher and higher every time this girl is talking. She admits that she had acid reflux. She admits that she had the chromosome disorder, but she didn't want to believe it. And I'll play that part for you here in a minute to show you those records as well. She will sit there and say that her mother was the one that talked the entire time and that she never had the opportunity or the chance to say anything. But you can see throughout these records that I'm going to be posting, it will say sometimes that her mother would verify something, but just as often it says Gypsy was talking, she was up in her usual state of health until a week ago, she reports that blah blah blah, etc., 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 so on. She had every opportunity to say things because she was actively talking. You can see through the records, if you have them, that it says that she had a rich vocabulary. She was clearly talking to him. On almost every report, she's talking to him and they report it. So if she was being there quiet, they would have reported that. They would have said, patient did not speak. Patient was out of it. Patient was unaware. Patient did not pay attention to what was going on and was playing with a stuffed animal, and so on. Gypsy and her mother told me that her asthma has been fairly mild and well controlled over the past year. She typically would get a steroid and she would have an inhaler. Her mother was fine with giving her allergy medication. She didn't push harder for any other treatments related to asthma, which is completely, it goes against the whole Munchausen by proxy thing. It just doesn't make sense. Here you can see her muscle biopsy results. It says the description of the specimen. The diagnosis ended up being type 2 fiber atrophy, muscle atrophy, weakening of the muscles. So again, it's very, very likely that Dee Dee was just maybe mispronouncing the name of what her diagnosis actually was. People do that all the time. They'll say they have one thing when it's actually, something kind of similar but different. She had a type of muscle atrophy, which is what muscular dystrophy actually is. It's a weakening and a breaking down of the muscles. She was placed under anesthetic for the biopsy. I guess they can be a little bit painful. But throughout these procedures, when Gypsy was put under, it's because it says the patient did not tolerate in-office procedures well, including the ear tubes. In particular, there's a report I'll show you right here where it says up at the very top, as well as a history of recurrent otis media, failed multiple medical treatments. She has had tubes placed. It was in the right external auditory canal. However, the patient did not tolerate attempted removal in the office. Due to the planned procedure, it was decided that we would remove it while the patient was asleep. So just right there, it says it. She did not tolerate the procedures well. It doesn't say mother intervened and said that it would be best. It was she didn't tolerate the procedure. She freaked out. You can see above the date, it says 2005. So about that time, she would have been, what, 14? 14 years old, and you can't sit in the chair and let a doctor do something? And you can see here down right just below me, it's a little bit difficult to see. I'll blow it up here on the side, but it says patient's previous surgical history, where it says PSH. GT fundo tube, so her feeding tube, she had that done 2 times. I think they put one type in the first time and then it got redone because there were some issues with it. 4 eye surgeries because she had a severe lazy eye and she had a couple different issues with her eyes. Clearly we can all see that, and it eventually, had she not had that surgery, she would have went blind. That's what she specifically had. It would lead to that. It would lead to very, very, very decreased vision. So she's quite lucky that her mom cared enough to get the surgery done for her. And didn't just look at her and be like, it's just probably a lazy eye, I'm sure she's fine. She couldn't see. Apparently she was only seeing shadows for the longest time. It says RMT times 2. I'm not entirely sure what that means. Tonsils were removed, colon polyps, which that could go because she had a lot of digestive issues. That can go along with her chromosome disorder. It affects nearly every single system in the body in some fashion. It's not always going to do it for every single individual the exact same, but apparently this is how it affected Gypsy. She has a lot of the main signs and symptoms of this. She did not get out of this unscathed. Her salivary glands, for hypersalivation, and that's it. And then she had some teeth pulled because they were rotting. It wasn't due to any medication. None of the medications that she was on listed that as a side effect. And regardless of how she wants to, put in her book that this is based on her perception and this isn't a true crime story, this is what I believe happened or what I perceive happened or whatever she wanted to word it as, it's just a straight up lie because it's not possible. With the amount of, for one, she has hardly any scars on her from all these surgeries. She's not had that many surgeries, so there's zero reasoning or logic or possibility that she could ever come close to hitting that 100 mark of being put under anesthetic. That is such an extreme, shocking number for someone to hear, and it is no wonder that people are just like, oh my God, you poor thing. All these operations, but she can't name them. Isn't it ironic how she can only name the ones she's actually had, which is like a total of 7 maybe? And she wants to count her getting her feeding tube changed or adjusted as a surgery. That's not a surgery either, and she wasn't put under that as well. It's crazy. It is just crazy to me. And the fact that she was the one that requested because she couldn't tolerate the in-office procedures as a normal person would. I can understand if she was 4 years old, little kids get really anxious and stressed out about certain things when people are touching them or whatever, but a lot of these when she was older, there's no reason for her to have to be put under. She was involved in this act.
Dating my mom, Christy was still just a friend. But my mom always felt like there was maybe something more. And that jealousy kind of grew from there, and there was always contention between the two.
Did you know that before writing the book, or did you?
I knew that from.
You did?
I did know that because often my mom would say really mean things about Christy to me growing up. So yeah, I knew that they did not, or at least I knew that my mom didn't like Christy. So
has Christy ever expressed that she didn't like your mom?
No, like she was very simple. She's like, I thought that your mom was a nice woman. It wasn't until after I started dating your dad that there was this back and forth tension.
Yeah. That is so interesting. Have your feelings changed at all? Like, did you not like Christy growing up because of what your mom said?
Exactly. So, I mean, growing up, my mom always used to tell me that Christy was like the home wrecker. She's the other woman. Like, she was always branded the other woman. Right.
So she didn't have her own identity. So you sort of took on what your mom felt, which, I mean, when you're young and you only have the one parent in your life, what are you supposed to know?
Exactly.
So obviously now they began talking about her mom, Dee Dee, and then their relationship with Rod and Christy. And what's crazy is clearly she's promoting her book, and in her book she was always talking about how much she loved Christy, how jealous she was of Mia and the life that Mia had, and how she even had a dream that Christy and Rod actually had to go rescue her from a police station. Story where her mom, I guess, locks her in the shed that she completely botches and remembers every single detail about everything wrong to make it sound much worse than what it actually is, because it never happened. But said in that dream that her mom was not actually her real mom, the police say, and that Christy and Rod were her real parents, that they've been looking for her to find her, and that she was so happy, and then it turned into a wonderful Disneyland dream, like all this nonsense. But yet here in this interview, while promoting the book, she tells a completely different story, that she had a resentment towards Christy because growing up around her mother viewed Christy as the other woman that stole away her man and the father of her child, which, I mean, technically kind of, yeah. I don't mean it disrespectfully, but that's just, it kind of is what happened. Christy and Rod had known each other for a very long time. They went to high school together. And then Dee Dee and Christy and Laura all worked together at the hospital. So yes, it's very understandable that as soon as Dee Dee starts dating Rod and gets pregnant by him and marries him, that Christy all of a sudden realizes her true feelings for him? Or is it possible that she just began to pursue him harder in order to take him away from Dee Dee? Maybe there was some jealousy towards Dee Dee. Who knows? But if Gypsy's going to sit there and say, well, because my mom made me think that she was this bad person, which she kind of has the right to do that. I mean, I don't recommend it for parents to do that, but if Gypsy didn't like her, why is she saying in the book that she's promoting a different story, that she wanted Christy to be her mom? If she was the one that ruined her family. And that goes back, again, if you've ever watched like my whole theory on how this all happened and what the purpose was and why this began, it's, again, my theory. I'm not saying anything as fact, but why I believe that this murder occurred. It always goes back to that, and it has nothing to do with wanting to be with guys. I mean, I think that was a bonus for her. Obviously, it had nothing to do with wanting to date. I think it had everything to do with Rod. She hated Christy. She hated her mother. She was angry because Rod abandoned her. I make all these connections, so if you want to go watch that, go check that out after this video. I do recommend it, just so we can all be on the same page when I start bringing up things. Just so you can see where my mindset is at. But yeah, I just don't get it, how she's going to contradict herself in her own book that she's there promoting. You would think she would just really stick to her one story, and that's what they say, you know, it's hard to remember all the lies, and that's why it's so easy to tell the truth. You don't have to remember anything.
With kids my age. And so when I was little, my stuffed animals, my Barbie dolls, my mom was my
social
everything,
life.
my social life.
Yeah.
So that's what I grew up knowing. And then as I got older, I felt it was almost like being sheltered, but also taking the part of a partner or spouse in a marriage. So all of her stress would be shared to me.
Right.
And I was kind of expected to carry all of this and be that person that she needed me to be.
Right. So you were the daughter, the friend, the partner,
everything,
all of the things from a really, really young age.
Yeah. It's like having a bad marriage without the sexual part of it.
Okay, first of all, that is like a very weird thing to say. Regardless of how she viewed the relationship, I find it just, it's not even, I don't know what the word is. It's just interesting how she can somehow manage to bring up this sexual aspect of things. And again, according to some research that I've done about her chromosome disorder, hypersexuality, and behavioral issues related to that. So she's proven again she didn't get away unscathed by this chromosome disorder like she wants people to believe. And, you know, had this information not ever really come out, none of us would even know that she actually does have a chromosome disorder. And I think that's just so crazy to me. Regardless, she wants to pretend that she was never around other kids. That's just not true. I'm gonna pull from her book and I'll let you see a couple of the clubs that she was in. This does not look like a socially isolated child comparatively to other kids that truly have no other interaction with anybody else. She was in multiple Star Wars clubs, Winners on Wheels, a disability group where she would hang out with other kids. She was a Girl Scout, and apparently she says she moved troops multiple times. Well, at least you were a Girl Scout. At least you got to do that. I didn't get to do that. A lot of kids don't get to do a lot of things. That's normal. Not every kid has the ability to do every single thing that you just believe that you should. Sometimes life is difficult and it's just not that easy and it's not that perfect. That doesn't make you abused. And obviously, Dee Dee and Gypsy, I've posted other videos about this. Gypsy and Dee Dee got to see every single movie they could possibly want to see for free because they had a friend that would let them watch movies for free. They had a monthly membership where they could get into the zoo, so they would go multiple times to the zoo per year, almost every single month. Dee Dee had a projector that she would put up outside and hang a sheet and allow all the neighborhood kids to come over to their house, projector, and play movies for people. She would charge for concessions, which is probably just to recover the cost of the snacks for other kids. But she would do this for the neighborhood. She was not isolated. She does not understand the meaning of the word. Yes, she maybe didn't get to go to every single event or get to go to things that she believes that she should have been able to go to, but like that doesn't make your parent abusive. It just doesn't. It makes your parent strict or particular about certain things, but that doesn't equal abuse. I'm sorry.
I cannot imagine. So CPS comes just one time in
Just one time.
your entire life?
Entire life.
I don't even have words because I've seen CPS get involved in situations for much, much less and either do something or don't. And so when you look back, I mean, at the time, did it even cross your mind to tell CPS what was going on?
I didn't even know who they were. So I want to make it clear that when I grew up, like, okay, so most parents, to kind of discipline their children, you know, they're like, oh, the boogeyman's going to get you.
Right.
Okay. So my mom never said the boogeyman. My mom said the state. So I grew up being afraid of people that I thought were bad people.
Right.
And so they begin talking about the whole CPS situation. And I'm going to play you a clip from Nick Godejohn's trial where Gypsy was actually asked about this CPS incident and she claims she doesn't remember it. But I also want to show you the report from the CPS whenever they started to come and do some interviewing and digging around into what Dee Dee was doing.
That were going to take me away from her. And they were called the state. And so what I didn't know back then was she was telling me to be afraid of CPS.
So now all of a sudden we've got Gypsy Rose creating a whole entirely new story that's not even included in the book, where she's saying that her mom raised her to be afraid of the state. So she goes from completely not remembering a CPS incident to also saying that she yeah, she met them, but they just didn't ask the correct questions to her, and that her mom wasn't hitting her at that time. She's mentioned that. And all of a sudden now she's got, I was being conditioned my entire life to be afraid of the state. Oddly enough, she doesn't mention that in her book. Weird, huh?
Lose muscle mass in your legs because you were in the wheelchair so much, or no?
I didn't lose muscle mass. No, because I still, like, every once in a while I would move my legs here and there, not meaning to, but, you know, she would have to correct me and be like, stop moving your legs.
At what point did you realize that you were not actually needing the wheelchair? Like, how old do you think you were?
I mean, I always knew that I could walk, and I've always been honest about that, but it was, and this goes right into the title. This is why I wanted to have the word stand in the title, is because, yes, I knew that I could walk. However, my mom didn't let me get out of the chair. So it was like I was forced to be in the chair.
That is so wild. I can't imagine. And it has to be, obviously don't want to speak ill of the dead, right? But like that has to be mental illness.
And apparently Gypsy Rose thinks that she is the only individual in the entire world that can sit in a chair for years and years and years at a time and just barely move her legs, and she thinks that that is enough to keep her legs from losing muscle mass. That is not physically possible. If you break your leg and you don't use it for like the 6 weeks that you have a cast on, instantly your muscle is going downhill. She is not some superhuman that just has the ability to not lose muscle mass. She had the ability to immediately get up and walk around, run around. You can't do that. You can't just not walk for years and then just get up and start going. Be like, oh, in her text message, she was texting Nick, like, oh, I'm not used to the gravity. That is just ridiculous. Gravity? No mention about muscle weakness there. You would think that she would do like some research about her own lies that she's telling. I think she's done, you know, a decent amount. Actually had access to tablets and computers while in prison or jail. And I put some money on the fact that she was definitely doing some digging on what she was actually going to say and learning about this mental illness. She said that she was interested in reading psychology and things like that. So she became well aware of what is needed for these markers and these events to make her mom into the biggest monster that she could and to make it look like she's a victim. There's absolutely no doubt in my mind that she did not spend a large amount of time researching this mental disorder that she wanted placed on her mom and digging and finding all these little different stories and scenarios to create and orchestrate this idea to put out to the public to make herself look innocent and her mom look like she deserved to die. I honestly just can't believe that there's some access to the internet, if that's true, that she was researching and looking this up. I feel like that shouldn't be allowed. But of course, I think Gypsy's just one of those occurrences, or like she's a rare person to be in the spotlight the way that she is. And I think that's what makes this situation very unique and intriguing.
But, you know, who's to say? So you meet Dan, and you still drank from a bottle at this time, and you pack the bottle to go to Dan's house. Did he already know this?
He didn't know. I didn't tell him a lot. I didn't tell him I had a feeding tube. I didn't tell him about necessarily how weird my life was and how different it was. There was certain things that came up in conversations, like I could walk, and obviously because I ran away that night.
Yeah.
But he was oblivious to a lot of what was going on.
And Dan was an adult that you met at a convention.
Correct.
And you guys had a romantic interest in each other?
I mean, I had a crush on him.
Right.
And I think he thought that I was cute, but it wasn't to the point where it was a relationship.
Okay. But you guys maybe had a little bit of an interest, a fling.
I was like, he's cute.
How old is he? How old was he?
He was 36.
And he thought you were how old?
15 at the time.
So that would be a pedophile, right?
I don't like saying that word. I don't like labeling someone anything. I don't like labels put on me, so that's why I don't put labels on other people.
Fair. Okay. But it's questionable. It's definitely questionable behavior. So your mom threatened to, or she did actually like out him as, you know, someone who liked children.
Correct. So, once my mom brought me back home after running away and catching me with Dan, that's whenever she started to like call the people that like knew about it. I was chained to a bed at this time. So
because you ran to Dan's.
Because I ran to Dan's.
And have you had communications with Dan since?
No.
Never. He's never reached out to make sure you were good and okay.
No, we had a text exchange like the day that I got arrested. And he had texted me and he's like, everybody says you're missing. Are you okay?
That was the text.
That was the text. And I never had any communication since.
Wow.
So she begins to tell her story about how she met Dan, which we know that she went to a neighbor's house. She got up, walked down the road, knocked on the door, and asked for a ride, and apparently just didn't ever think to do that again if she needed to escape, which again, I want to point out, had Gypsy really wanted to run away, it would have probably been relatively easy. She mentioned throughout this interview that her mom would often leave to go to Walmart or various other situations where she was alone and would record those strange videos that she would send to Nick. So why couldn't she have not ran away at that point? Why couldn't she have went to a neighbor's house in the middle of the night again to get help? Why couldn't she have grabbed the car keys and drove a little ways down the road and got help? Because she didn't want help. She wanted her mom dead and out of her life. That way her dad would be forced to care for her. That is it. She doesn't care. She doesn't care about Nick. She instantly got over him. She was done with him. Just within a short period of time. It was never about Nick. It was never about love. It was never about boys. It was about her dad. She was enraged that he left her and abandoned her, and he stopped seeing her. In the distance between those visits or calls grew bigger and bigger, and her rage grew more and more and more.
To be fair, in a situation like that, whether you're in an abusive relationship with your parent or not, everyone was doing that, right? Like, I was doing that. If I had access to a computer, I was going to do whatever I could to get on it and go on AIM and whatever else I could do. You know what I mean? So
just hide the tab button or whatever.
That, I think, comes with some adolescence. You know what I mean?
Yeah, some immaturity there, of course.
But so, how did you know about like a dating site?
I seen a commercial for it on TV.
Yeah.
It was like Christian Mingle or something like that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, my logic was,
when Gypsy begins to speak about Nick, she immediately bypasses the question about Nick having an intellectual disability, because that would interfere with the narrative that she's trying to push, that he was some violent, raging monster, although he had absolutely zero history of any violent offenses or any incidents that were violent, nothing relating to it. His mom also said that he's never been in a fight. He's never reacted angrily in any sort of way. If he ever got mad, he would cry. He had the intellectual capabilities of about a 14-year-old at the oldest, and that's where he'll pretty much stay. But she wants to bypass that and go back to this immediately, like, he's a monster, he's violent, people tried to warn me about him, I wanted to fix him with this Beauty and the Beast syndrome, which, that is such a weird, I almost wonder, had she not actually went to prison and went to go live with her dad like they wanted, she might have very well ended up doing something to Christy or Mia due to that rage and the jealousy.
But so you meet Nick online later in 2012 after the second escape attempt, the second escape attempt. And you connected on a Christian dating site?
yes.
Where was your mom during this time?
So my mom was around the house. We still lived together. She and I had a joint laptop that we would share together. And electronics was difficult for her to let me be on.
Right.
Because of what happened in the past.
Right.
So, electronics was just something that was definitely a hot button issue.
Right.
So, I mean, there was a little bit of manipulation on my part, and I am not, too good to own up to that, where I did manipulate the situation where my mom didn't know that I was on Facebook. But
how? How did you hide it?
By switching tabs.
And she didn't know any different?
She didn't know any different.
And again, she's sitting here in this interview with this girl from Teen Mom, and she's lying straight to her face. She doesn't mention that they had 3 laptops. She says her and her mom shared one and she would just hide the tabs. They had 3 laptops. Gypsy had her own, her mom had one, and then they had another one. Apparently in one scenario, whether, I don't know if this is true or not, Dee Dee broke one, but you can see in the text messages that Gypsy broke her laptop prior to Dee Dee being murdered. There was something on the laptop that she probably did not want found, and she didn't want to talk about it clearly. That's why she ended up blowing up on Nick in the text messages. So it's funny how she just fails to mention that, and that they had multiple government issued phones. She wants to act like they didn't have a phone and she had to sneak away to buy one when that's not true. I've made a video about that as well. If you guys go through and watch other videos that I've done, she'll just lie straight to their face. And not even a hesitation to do it.
Someone who possibly was, disabled in some ways. And that was not confirmed or, anything in the book, but I think that is some of what the public thinks. But right. Based on what I read in this book was that he was already having all types of very, very violent fantasies prior to even meeting you.
Correct. He had those with other ex-girlfriends.
Who reached out to you.
Who reached out to me to warn me that he was like that. And I'm like, oh, it's just, it's a scorned ex-girlfriend. And I just kind of brushed it off right. Whatever. They're just talking smack.
And you just ignored it.
I just ignored it.
Well, did it ever scare you? Did you ever think he was going to do something to you?
I mean, of course, later on in the relationship. But I still was in the mindset oh, this person loves me. This person is giving me attention. This person loves me for me.
You can look past the violence at that point. I can look
past it.
So,
or change him.
Right. That's a big one. I think up until my late 20s, I thought I could change a man. You know what I mean? So
yeah, exactly. I think I romanticized the idea of, being my man's savior just as much as he was mine.
Right.
So it was like the Beauty and the Beast syndrome.
Did he ever know that maybe you thought that he should get help?
Yeah. I mean, I mentioned it. I mean, therapy wasn't really something I was talking about or in at that time.
Right.
But I often expressed that I wish that we could have a normal relationship is Absolutely. What I would call it.
Yeah. But that never happened.
Continually, I still believe that she has this mentality of fixing somebody that's like a monster. I don't know. But again, it's probably something that she's just researched in the past and just felt like, yeah, I could go with that. That would sound good. She ran the show with Nick. It's beyond clear in the text messages if you read them. She controlled that conversation 24/7. When she says Nick was in charge, she told him he could be the one in charge. In any moment, she was like, okay, you can be in charge now. So who's really in charge if you're the one telling somebody they can be in charge for a minute? And Dan also testified that Gypsy was clearly into the BDSM way before Nick ever came into the picture, and she was the one, she liked doing this power play thing, and she really took a liking to being the one in control. She did not want to be the submissive type. She wanted to be the dominant, overly powerful person to be able to decide what is going to be going on. She was the one that told Nick exactly what to do and how to do it. Even down to the moment where she claimed she was sexually assaulted, she told him exactly what she wanted done to her. I've never known anybody to get to step-by-step play pretty much decide how they want to be raped and then still claim rape.
And I don't want to say too much because I want people to read them in the book, but some of the ideas that he brought to you about how to unalive your mom were twisted.
And all of that is factual evidence, and it's in Facebook messages. There is actual proof that these things were said. Whether or not those case files are released to the public, I'm not sure, but there is a paper trail.
So did that come up in court, like in trial?
It did. It was discussed.
So people could find that if they wanted to.
The prosecutor definitely did.
This was the first time I had read that, so I don't know if there's a little bit of attention on it, in the media, but I was shocked. I couldn't even...
Not a lot of people know about that stuff because what is in a confidential case file, because he is still going through his appeal, so there is a portion of case files that are not out to the public.
Okay.
So, that's why I think a lot of people are just like, okay, it's one-sided. And then, in my opinion, whether it was conscious or not, I feel like maybe we manipulated each other
Absolutely.
It was mutual.
Right. But I definitely don't want it to go.
She wants to talk about the various alter personalities that Nick Godejohn had, but she fails to mention what her alternative personalities were into as well. What about Ruby? What about Demona Loveslave? What about Bella, the little girl, Candy, Katie? What about all of those? What were their little interesting quirks that they were into? No, we don't want to get into that, right? We don't want to talk about how Ruby was a sociopath, psychopath, whatever she said, who likes to rape and kill and loves to kill other people. Unless it was a family member, then he would have to come and do it. But anybody else, dead. We like to do crime and we're really good at it. We like to rob and steal and we're good at lying and blah, 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 all these things that she said. And I find it interesting that she would, of course, quote something that's not, like, available in their record because Nick is still going through his appeal. So there is still some information that is not available. But I just find it interesting. Of course, she would say, oh, it's there. What proves what I'm saying is there, but it's not there, you know, because she is well aware that some of that information can't be released yet.
That's so interesting. Do you, just from speaking to other family members or anything, did your mom fall under any of the, like, typical symptoms?
No, she did not display any of the symptoms.
When I was pregnant, not for all the pregnancies, surprisingly, but I was able to do genetic testing. I don't know if you did it. It's all this genetic testing for genetic disorders. And I came back positive for something, but then it wouldn't necessarily, like one of my children wouldn't get it unless my partner also was a carrier.
Oh, okay. I see
so
what you're saying.
Is it not, it could be like that, but also developed without?
Correct.
Okay.
So, my daughter has a 50% chance of inheriting it from me.
Okay.
Now that, like, I got retested because I was tested in 2012. But because of everything that my mom said and did, I was not going to just go on that test result from that long ago. So I got retested a few months ago and it still came back positive.
Okay.
So, I'm speaking with a geneticist now to kind of know where to go with that and also what that means for my future children.
Right.
So it could be that, you know, my daughter might get it, she might not, but if she does, then at that point we'd have to watch her growth.
Okay.
Because it's not something like Down syndrome where you know the quality of life that is associated with. This is a gamble. You don't know what you're going to get. Right.
So she could be unscathed like you, where you're carrying it, you have it, but not necessarily affected by it.
Exactly.
Same thing for your daughter.
Correct.
Okay. That's so interesting. I had never heard of it until I read it in the book. And so it was really interesting. And I went down a rabbit hole of Google and I'm like, I don't know, because I had no idea what it was. You briefly touched on the bottle possibly having an effect on your teeth, right? But your teeth were also pulled out.
Correct. They were extracted, my front ones.
But not necessarily because of the bottle, or it was because of the bottle?
No, it wasn't because of the bottle. You know, what's interesting is in the medical records, there's no clear answer for why they were extracted.
I read that.
Now, what we can speculate on is lack of good nutrition. We can speculate medication.
That was my question. I had said maybe like certain medications will deteriorate your teeth, or if you're taking any sort of liquid, if it sits in your mouth for a long time, like would that contribute to it? Correct.
So, we can only really kind of speculate why by seeing other facts. So it's probably a strong possibility that certain medications wore the enamel down or had certain effects. I also grew up with acid reflux. Okay. So, I mean, there's probably a contributing factor of things.
For sure. Going back to is it a genetic disorder?
Yes.
Okay. Going back to that, how did you tell Ken?
Well, he was there when I took the test. Okay. So I had got a blood panel done. The results came back. My doctor called me and she said, you are positive for the microdeletion. That was a hard pill to swallow because I was really, really hoping that was something that my mom made up. Yeah. Or that was just falsified. So this was the one thing that I actually do have. And it was really heartbreaking because it's like we're both super hopeful. But that does kind of impact how many kids will we have, because every child that we have, that's a 50% gamble.
Maybe you've already explored this, but is there a world where if you did something like IVF that they're able to test the embryos beforehand for that? I don't know.
I don't know if that's possible or not, but there is, after she is born, then we can do genetic testing for her, and then get answers from there. So that's the thing. So my father just got recently tested for it to see if it came from him or from her. Okay. Like a carrier. Exactly. Okay. So my father came back negative. Okay. There's no way to test my mom.
Even with like remains or something?
Even with that, we need her blood. And so there's no way to know. But my doctor did tell me that it could be inherited, or it could develop on its own. So it could be possible that neither parent had it and it just developed in me.
That's so interesting. Do you, just from speaking to...
So I want to show you the reports that go over her microdeletion, and you can read them for yourself. So clearly Gypsy remembers being tested for this, and she didn't want to believe it apparently, but you can read in that report that it says that her mother tested negative for this. I don't know why she's pretending that she isn't sure if her mother carried it, but I have also heard from somewhere, and I'm going to be careful when I say this, I've not seen the video or the evidence that shows this, but I have heard that apparently Christy did admit that Rod was a carrier for this. So there you go, that Gypsy is, of course, admitting that she has this chromosome deletion, but she just, of course, wants to play it off like, oh, I don't have any of these problems. But the issue is people aren't seeing the actual records, and that is why I make these videos where I'm showing you the records. I'm not trying to gatekeep and just, keep the records and I want you just to listen to me. No, I want to show you these records. I want you to go through and I want you to read them for yourself. I don't want to just tell you about them. I want you to see it and I want you to believe it, because that's how I am. Seeing is believing, and that's what this is really boiling down to, is you have to see the facts and the evidence for what they are. And the facts and the evidence point to the fact that she is actively manipulating multiple people, pretty much the entire public, of those that haven't really looked into her, and they just truly believe that she is a victim of all of this medical abuse, and it's just not true. She was in on the con. She was a grown woman. She had every single opportunity to escape, and the fact that she really technically only tried one time is kind of pathetic. You try one time and then you're like, all right, time to die. What? That's just insane to me. You can't just, usually it's like, oh, okay, this is a last resort type of thing. What? That's just crazy. In those 2 years that you were working on Nick overtime, just like you didn't try anymore, you just waited for the plan to be carried out. You weren't attempting other alternatives. No, of course not, because that's not what you really wanted, because you weren't actually being abused. You just wanted your mom out of the picture permanently. You didn't want to deal with her anymore. Because you know that she knew that she had to get her dad to herself, and that's what it is. I think it's really disgusting that Gypsy's even speaking on Nick Godejohn's mother and the fact that she died. And she wants to say, ironically enough, it was in June, like as if that was just some weird coincidence. No, I'm sure that his mom is well aware of the fact that his life was basically ended in the month of June and she just couldn't handle it anymore. I imagine it would maybe be an accidental. It might have been purposely. I don't know. But regardless, she has no place to speak on what she put his mother through. She's the reason that they're all dead. All of their lives have ended because of her directly. Had she not done what she did, manipulating Nick into killing her mother, Dee Dee would be alive, Nick would still have a life, Nick's mom would be alive. And she can't even own up to it. That's what's disturbing about the whole thing. Really disgusting. But I just wanted to go over that with you guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you guys have any more questions about anything else that you want me to make a video about, or if you have anything in particular about the records that you'd like me to show, let me know down in the comments. Let me know what you think about this podcast, if you've watched it or just from the clips that I've shown you today. Yeah, just let me know what you think in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and hit the subscribe button. Thank you for coming and visiting my channel. I will see you guys next time. Bye.